I am Bill Huffman, and welcome to this week's bonus episode of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, where Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast and I conclude our discussion about the investigation discovery documentary, The Lake Erie Murders, Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic. And I also want to say thank you again to the listeners for their support, and to let you know that there will be more episodes to come on this case, as well as new interviews and theories. In the meantime, let's jump right back into the conversation I was having with Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast. Yeah, we never did chat about your other theory. We'll go ahead with what you were just talking. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. And but one thing that when we covered the Oakland County child killer case, which I think it should be called the Oakland County child killers, because I believe multiple people were involved in that. But one thing that we didn't discuss during that portion is these children were kept for an extended period of time before they were killed and then dumped. And there's a lot of people that have speculated throughout the years that that case is somewhat connected to Amy's case. And, you know, that's where we were kind of beating around the bush a little bit in getting to there. But my theory with the Oakland County child killer case is when these kids were kept, and you referenced the chicken, you know, they determined that the last meal that Timothy King ate was chicken. And his mother stated it was either a radio or TV interview shortly before he was found that she just wants him to come home so she can cook for him his favorite meal, fried chicken. And so a lot of people throughout the years have always thought, well, this was the killer's way of taunting the parents, taunting the media, taunting police, saying, hey, I know you're looking for me. I'm watching you, so much so that I fed this kid exactly what his mother stated in that interview. I actually think what was going on with these kids is, I think, you know, because it's often reported that they were bathed, that they were well taken care of during the time that they were held captive. I think that they were being told to do certain things or go along with certain things, and I think they were rewarded. And I think that was their way of
the chicken bone would have been a reward for
something terrible. But I think that, and then when whomever was holding them got tired of rewarding them or couldn't reward them anymore, it was time to get rid of this problem that I've kept in my house for X number of days. Now, which leads me to a long way of saying this. I had a dream the other night about Amy's case, and I was kind of like visually, I don't know that I was really seeing it go down or see it, a portion of it go down, but I think the opposite happened with Amy's case. I think at some point she fought back and didn't go along with whatever this person wanted. And I think ultimately that's why she was killed. Not to say that it was her fault, because we all should fight back. Anybody makes you do something you don't want to do, you fight back. But I think that it looks to me like this. I think that this individual thought that there could have been some type of relationship. I think that he was sexually attracted to her. I think that he would have preferred to keep her alive and well as long as he thought he could, like in the Oakland County child killers case, but couldn't because she fought back. And I think she fought back fairly quickly. And I also wonder, one thing that I've wondered about this case is we talked about, you know, there was blunt force trauma to was it the back right side of her head? And then,
the back right,
and then
back right side.
Then
Stab wounds on the left
to
side
the
of the neck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he must have hit the carotid artery, because she pretty much bled out, is the way that I've always been told that the autopsy reads.
Right.
And so I almost wonder if the first portion of her fighting back was inside this person's vehicle. You know, if she's sitting shotgun and he has to striker
That's
or whatever.
exactly the theory that James, back when James and I met in 2000 and when was it? 2007, 2008. And we had met at the plaza and we are just discussing the case, and we used to get beers together and, discuss Amy's case. And that was when I was working at one of the local news stations. And we went down to the site where she was found. But the theory that we kept coming up with, or at least that I kept coming up with, because the stab wounds weren't very large.
Right.
So, the thought was, okay, he's driving in the car, she's putting up a fight. And now what the hell do you do? And the thought was, okay, he takes her and smashes her head against the side of the car window, or he has something in the backseat like Ted Bundy style. He would, the thing that Bundy would use, sometimes would even be able to kill the person.
Yeah.
Or, at the very least, knock them unconscious. But the stab wounds to the neck are obviously what were the killer. So the drive, like we've discussed, is, again, she was found 50 miles from where she was taken. If, what the hell happened between here and there?
Yeah.
And that's where this whole fucking case comes together.
Yep.
Put those two together, or, connect those three things and you'll have your answer. But the thing about James's theory, that the circumstantial evidence is always going to be there, with James's person.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't deny the fact that the guy lived close to where the body was found. And right. But then you also wonder, what the hell are they waiting for? Other than, unless they feel like they've got enough on somebody else. I just don't know. They've been, even Spetzel said before, we've been able to convict people in Bay on circumstantial evidence, strictly circumstantial evidence, and even referenced a case in 2001 of some carpenter who was killed in Bay, and they were able to convict. So it just, question.
I think it's because, and I don't know that there's good reason for this, but I think it's because they really think that it's not him. There's no other answer. And I don't know what it is that makes them think that it's not him. I don't think that, look, if there were something that cleared him, they would say that. They would tell us, because what I have heard multiple times in interviews, that some that you have done, some that TV, networks have done, they're always very quick to remind us that just because somebody wrote a book and that person has a suspect, we've not made an arrest yet. We don't know who this individual is. They're very quick to point that out and very forthcoming with that. They want the public to know that, they don't know who the guy is.
That was the number one thing Torsney wanted me to say. And he's like, the reason why I'm doing this is because just because something's been published doesn't mean it's true. And we still want tips. We still, and the fact that they are still, James has been doing this on his blog for, over a decade now. And, the tips that he gets, sometimes he gets them before, sometimes he gets them after, but the FBI and the police are still following up on him. So if the fact that they thought it was this one guy, they wouldn't be following up on these other tips, would they? Right.
And I don't want to, piss on anyone's Cheerios, but the thing here is that the thing that scares me about Amy's case and really saddens me about Amy's case, when they catch the Golden State Killer, when they catch Christy Merrick's killer, April Tinsley's killer, everybody gets excited because they think that, the case that's been haunting me for all these years could be the next one that they solve through familial DNA. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't want to ruin anybody's day, but the one thing that I pointed out to some people that came to me and spoke to me about Amy's case and said those exact words, do you think that with all this new technology, that with familial DNA, that they will be able to crack Amy's case? And I said, I wouldn't get too optimistic about Amy's case. And the reason being is all the, and I know that there's some out there that have been solved that I'm unaware of. So I don't know every story. I don't know every case that has been solved using this new technology, or this new method, I should say. But the ones that I am well aware of, and not to get too gross, they had a lot of DNA to work with, a lot. And I don't feel like Amy's case that they have a lot to work with. Now, that doesn't mean that technology won't advance and that they someday will have enough. But all those other cases, they had a lot to work with.
Yeah, Tinsley's case, for example, I mean, the guy literally left his DNA as
like
many places as he could possibly could.
4 or 5 different places. And with Christy Merrick's, they had DNA on her body and on the carpet around her.
Wasn't it chewing gum too that caught him?
Well, he had discarded. They went to his work and
gotcha.
he discarded chewing gum.
Gotcha. They were able to connect him that way.
And
but that was just resolved this week.
Yeah, and then so you have the Aurora Hammer Slayer. That there was multiple. They caught him, but there was multiple crime scenes. There was multiple victims that he left DNA, and then the Golden State Killer had 10 victims, a dozen victims, and then on top of that, many rapes that he didn't kill. So, unfortunately, I'm just kind of doing the math here myself, and I don't feel like this is a good candidate for the breaks that we've been seeing within the last 18 months. I don't think it fits into that yet. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I would love to be, look, as I always say, I'd rather be surprised than right in this situation. So I hope that I'm wrong. I think that in the immediate future, our best hope is that something comes from the public. And I think that Torsney and Spetzel and those guys are very good and very smart to remind the public that, hey, we still need your help. We're sitting here waiting for this other stuff to go on that we can't control.
Right.
Their only hope to getting a confession, we just said DNA or confession is really the only way that I see this thing getting resolved. The only way they're getting a confession at this point is talking to the right person. Because unless you get a deathbed type confession, but I mean, if this guy hasn't cracked in all these years, I don't think he's just cracking for no reason.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I emphasized in my podcast was, when a case goes on this long, I mean, obviously your theories can run all over the place. And I mean, the theory that we discussed earlier about, Ted Lamborghini and the fact that, his connections to the Oakland County killings and, or at least the ring that was occurring in Michigan, it does make you wonder, and I know, Ford isn't GM, and I get the connect, I get that. Right. But it doesn't mean that he couldn't have been friends with the mechanics at the GM dealership that Mark frequented, and could have been there on days that he was, visiting or doing his sales thing. Obviously, it wasn't his DNA because they would have because he's in jail serving life at the moment for other crimes, but it does beg the question, especially with James just brought up about 3 different hairs.
But wasn't Lamborghini
French in the thing?
Wasn't Lamborghini questioned about it, and he refused to answer questions regarding Amy Mihaljevic? Because for those of the people that will be listening to this, after the Oakland County case, after the killing stopped up there, at some point Lamborghini moved from that area to Northeast Ohio. So that's why we're
Parma Heights, to be exact.
Yeah, Parma Heights.
which is about 20 minutes from Bay Village. So, I mean, it's not super close, but it's definitely, let's put it this way. When they say that they're not able to trace the phone calls, because they weren't long distance.
Right.
Well, Parma Heights isn't long distance. So,
Same,
I mean,
same
it just, again,
code.
it just, same area code. So it brings up all these different damn theories, and people run wild with all different speculations. But it's like Occam's razor. It's got to be the simplest answer. I mean, it 99.9% of the time, it's not a giant conspiracy. It's not some pedophile ring or some mastermind criminal. I mean, this is probably somebody's dad, which is just disgusting to think.
And
That's
very
just
likely
been
a
living with a
one-off.
secret. Yeah, a one-off, and been living with a secret for 30 years. And like you said, if he hasn't cracked yet, unless they get him in the corner with some evidence that he can't deny, I don't see him like just one day waking up and feeling like I got to get this off my chest type of thing. I mean, as much as we would all love that to be the case, I think he's probably pretty confident at this point that, he's gotten away with it so far.
Yeah.
And I think the pressure, the podcast and the documentary was great because it did bring it to like the national level. I mean, I know that it's always been a national. I mean, your podcast is national, my podcast national. They reach people that watch ID or whatever aren't necessarily our listeners too. So
Right.
This did open up a whole new avenue of people that now know about the case. And it's kind of like what Torsney said. We still want people from, cops, even from other jurisdictions, to think about, hey, are there any damn similarities between Amy's case? Because, I mean, think about the circumstances that surround Amy's case and how she was kidnapped are the most unique of any kidnapping situation that I can think of. I can't think of one that's more mysterious. I mean, who the fuck calls and sets up and arranges a kidnapping with the chance that he could just be picked up right then and there? I mean, right then and there, the cops could just be waiting. Hey, what were you doing? I know this was before To Catch a Predator and all that, Dateline stuff. But in all reality, the guy was putting himself out there. Like, I know he couldn't have gotten charged with anything, I guess. I mean, would he not? I mean, he probably wouldn't have been charged with anything, but I don't know, maybe soliciting a minor. I don't know. Just
that whole ruse is, I think, the reason why so many people are fascinated by this case. So first of all, you have it's almost that phone call invited a killer into their home. Picking up that phone on that day, it's almost like letting the killer in your front door in a way. What is it, Lost Boys, where the vampire gets some kind of formal greeting by the man of the house into their home, so therefore he can, I can't remember how that went down, but that's what I kind of picture. You pick up the phone and it's inviting the killer into your home almost. And I think that for parents at the time in Ohio, that's what terrified them. And that's why they read about the case. That's why they watched the news hoping that somebody would be arrested and arrested soon, because it was haunting and terrifying to think that, hey, this killer used the phone to enter our home and take our little girl, and she never came back. And then years later, the fascination behind that ruse is for people like you and I, the armchair detectives. There is meat on the bone for us. If somebody is snatched off the street and there's no eyewitnesses, there's no screams, there's no nothing, nobody saw a car, nobody saw a guy, there's no meat on the bone. There's nothing for us to investigate. And because there was this phone call, and thank God she told somebody. I mean, that's one thing that I just thank God that she told somebody, because he didn't want her to tell anybody. And had she not, we would have maybe have never made this connection, never known that she was in communication with this guy.
Well, that's the reason why I don't believe that he had anything to do with Margaret. I think that he knew that she would eventually tell somebody. And so he's not going to put himself out there and be like, oh, I actually have connections with Margaret. Right. He's going to you do the opposite. He's going to play misdirection right off the bat. I mean, if this is his, let's say, 8th, 9th, 10th attempt at doing this, he's probably fine-tuned his pitch and figured, well, kids are kids. They're going to probably tell somebody. So I'm going to just come up with something other than, I'm going to use her mom's work as the conduit, but the fact I'm not actually from her background or anything like that.
Here's the thing too about, I said earlier, he either got lucky and said the right thing, or he had good knowledge and knew what to say. But we kind of got into this last time, well, maybe 2 times ago when we spoke. But I was telling you, I was like, you don't have to be a genius to manipulate this child, even though she's very smart. You could play the numbers and be right. And what I mean by that is, if you call a home phone number in 1989 at 3:15 in the afternoon, you're playing it's a higher percentage that a child is going to be home without an adult at that time than if you called after 5. So you're playing the percentages. It's just like poker. You play the percentages. Now here's another thing. I'm talking to you for the first time, and I want to prove to you that I know you in a loose, roundabout way. You don't know me, but I know your mother. Well, why would I pick mother instead of father? Guess what? More people have, if it is a single-parent home, more people have a mom at home than they do a dad. You're playing the percentages. Mm-hmm. This is something this dude has worked through. Some of the stuff he knew, and some of the stuff he knew enough to get right.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about I had a phone call that caught me off guard? Did I ever tell you my situation?
Briefly, but I want to hear
I'll run you through it real quick again. Just to we all look at, oh my gosh, this girl's talking to a stranger on the phone and she dropped her guard and she's going to go meet this guy. I was 16 and I was in the plain dealer for being, one of the top area all-star runners or something like that. And there was a color picture of me in the paper, and a week went by and I get a phone call, and this guy claims that he's a reporter from the Westlife, and right away my guards dropped, and he's like, would you want to do a phone interview? And I was like, hey, sure, why not? Because I just done the plain dealer, why not? It's just a local guy. And he asked me normal questions and stuff, but he literally kept me on the phone for probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I didn't know who the hell I was talking to, but I was just talking away. And the abnormal thing that he asked me was, what size shoe do I wear? And he ended up calling back a week later and said some preferred things. And so I kind of have a personal connection to the fact that a kid can get called at home. I remember being scared to death of the fact that the guy knew my phone number. He knew my address. So
hang on. How do you think he got your phone number?
Now, I have a theory on who this individual is, and
okay, so you don't know 100% who it was.
I don't know 100% who it was, but my family had connections to certain activities that I was involved in that I could have been cross paths with this certain individual that I know has gotten in trouble for similar type of things. And James and I had discussed this individual, I think in episode 3, possibly, or episode 5. I'm not sure. Yeah. So for me, I have the personal connection that I was Amy's age. I grew up, just a few miles from where she did. We probably ran in the same circle, but the fact that she was convinced to go meet this guy, I feel empathetic to her. Yeah, it sounds so dumb. Like, yo, why would you go do that? But she was just trying to do something nice for her mom, and that's what makes it so tragic at the end of the day. I mean, really.
And she was a little kid. I mean, even if somebody were to tell me, "Hey, she did a really stupid thing meeting this guy," I I've heard that from a few people, and I want to grab those people and shake them and go, "She was a child. She was manipulated by somebody that had much more real life experiences than she did, and not only did he manipulate her, but he denied her of all those real life experiences shortly after that took place. She was a child. um it's unfortunate. She was not a dumb kid. She was manipulated. Yes, it was a dumb thing to do, and that's why I think that at some point she realized, oh shit, I screwed up. This person isn't who they told me they were. We're not going to where he said we're going. And I think she was not only smart, but I think she was probably a tough kid. And I think she fought back at some point and said, you know what? I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. And I don't care how this turns out, but you're not going to, just be able to do whatever you want to do. I think sometime after the phone call to her mom, I think she figured it out. And I struggle with that too, because it's when I like to, that's what keeps me up at night. When you know enough about the case to play it through in your mind and let your mind run wild and try to figure out what and why, how did things happen? I struggle with, did he have a gun on her when she made that phone call? Did he threaten her and then she make that phone call, or was she still unaware and playing along at that point when the phone call was made?
Ohio is a land of mystery, from missing shipwrecks and lost treasure beneath her surface to strange phenomenon slicing through her skies. From myths that have evolved around historic events and people to the unsolved murders and disappearances that keep her communities wondering what happened. Find Ohio Mysteries on your favorite podcast app, and let's explore the inexplicable. OhioMysteries.com.
Yeah, and that, when you bring that up, they always talk about how Margaret had this sixth sense that something else was going on. But if you read the newspaper reports and you read the actual police reports from that day, she wasn't actually able to get out of work right away. I mean, it's not like
Right.
she got that phone call and ran right home. She may have thought something was off, but it wasn't as dramatic as, no surprise there, it wasn't as dramatic as some people have made it out to be, because I think it was, it was a Friday, so I think she didn't even get home until 5. So, he had a good head start with whatever he was planning to do. But the fact that she was, unlike the Oakland County kids, where they were apparently kept alive for a period of time, the remains in her stomach, and what they were able to determine was that she was not even alive for more than 24 hours, at the most 48 hours after the abduction. And that goes to what you were saying before about her putting up a fight, and it not going the way the guy wanted it to, as well as the fact that when he first set out on this plan, whatever you want to call it, that his hope was to have more time with Amy than what he actually ended up with, because of the fact that she was a fighter. And her dad even said she was an athlete. She wouldn't have gone with somebody she didn't know. So my guess is she put up a struggle. She was manipulated, but like you said, I think she quickly realized, I'm in over my head, and I'm now in somebody's car that I don't know who and what is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And that's the scariest thing for anybody, I think, especially for parents that are just learning about this case. Like, anybody that didn't know of this, the phone calls, and now we have just so many different means to get access to kids with, and that's what Torsney was saying. He's like, with the internet and just with Twitter and God, you name the social media outlet. I think Spetzel even brought it up. Like, the amount of information that kids just put out there, just out in the universe. I don't have children myself, so I luckily don't have that worry, but I can't imagine not being concerned about that. It's so disconcerting to think that this guy is still out there. And if he just decided, BTK took time off. It's not to say that this guy couldn't kill again. I mean, it's not like, hey, I'm a killer and I'm not going to do it again. Once a killer, always a killer.
Well, and a bazillion things could have happened to interfere with that if he did intend to kill again. It was actually Dennis Rader, BTK, that said, because he combats the whole thought, because he is the first person that the experts go to when, for instance, the Colonial Parkway murders. There was, if in fact all those murders are connected, it was 4 separate killings. There were 8 killings total, but it happened at 4 different times through the span of a year and a half or something like that, 2 years, let's say. Well, they're very quick to point out when they stopped. All these people say, well, something must have happened because the killing stopped. And then the FBI is very quick to point out and go, well, Dennis Rader, we now know that because of BTK that they can stop. And sometimes they do stop, and sometimes there's very long periods in between killing. What I found fascinating was Dennis Rader said, no, they can believe whatever they want. I never stopped killing. And he's not saying, hey, there's victims out there. A lot of people think there's victims out there that we're unaware of, and that's what he means by that. But what he means by that is, and you can this can be found, so he says, I was always looking for the next victim. I was always trolling. I was always hunting. I was always working one of these projects. Life got in the way. I had a job. I had a family. I had, I was involved in the Boy Scouts. My kids had obligations. I had obligations at church. Sometimes life got in the way of his hobby. It was something he considered to be his secret career.
Disturbing.
He doesn't put it so succinctly, but that's the truth. That's what he means there, is that I never stopped, just life got in the way. So who knows what this guy, I think you and I feel very similar that it's likely a one-off. I wouldn't be surprised if the individual moved away. I think what would surprise me the most is if in fact, when they do make an arrest, if they find the guy in Northeast Ohio, I think that will be a bit shocking to me.
That would be really, I think that would open up so many different questions if he was actually found. I mean, if he was found still living in the area, then, I mean, every case that has been unsolved in the last 30, 40 years is going to be re-examined, because how did he slip through the cracks?
Right. Before we wrap up, I want to say, one, I loved the podcast, and
thank you.
I'm hoping that there's more episodes. It was the highlight of my Friday morning for a very long time, and you've taken that from me, Bill, now that you've gone away, so I need a little more. Okay. I need you to bring back my Friday mornings. But after, what's the next project for you? Do you have something in the works or an idea? Do you want to share that with everybody?
Well, I'm actually going to be working on a book. Okay. I've been putting together a book for a number of, I don't want to say years, but for a while now. And with what's transpired with the podcast and with everything that, the success of the podcast, I don't know, I've got a story to tell that, I'm hoping to get published at some point in the next year. And James and I were talking about it before we jumped on the chat today, and hopefully that will be my next step. But in the process, or in the meantime, the Who Killed will become a series, and I'm probably going to do, it's not so much similar to what you guys do where you do one case a week. I'll probably do like mini series opposed to having like 16 episodes dedicated to the Mihaljevic case. I'll probably do 4 episodes dedicated to a particular case. And so it will be like it will just kind of be a rolling show, similar to what your show is. And I'm not going to have necessarily seasons, but just mostly episodes. Okay. Episode 17, episode 18, like this will be under the Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic podcast, obviously, and the roundtable. But yeah, the goal has been and always has been to turn the Who Killed into a series, and because there's always that person that every town has a case that they want solved, and I'm committed to the medium. I love the podcast medium. The feedback's been fabulous. Don't read the negatives. It's what I've learned. As far as reviews go. I mean, sometimes they can be helpful, but sometimes they can be, I think that I was listening to your guys' Q&A on Off the Record. You were talking about taking, how do you take the compliments? Right. And then the captain had a good response, said, well, if you take the compliments too seriously, then you're going to take the negative comments too seriously. And so like, that's something that I've learned through the podcast is, everybody's got an opinion. Yeah. And not everybody's doing something about it, but they can type in their little, phone and tell you suck. And,
well, and some of them can be rather vicious, but it's, I think that people sometimes forget that, we're just human beings. We're just regular dudes with feelings and, and, but, I think your show's been fantastic. So I look forward to what's left of it. And I look forward to when you take your next case.
Yeah. I mean, obviously when anything breaks with Amy's case, the show is never, it's just like the case. It's not closed, it's right. It's not a cold case. The case is going to maintain, it's going to kind of just be an existing show that I will continually update, but I'm going to also do other shows along the lines of, Who Killed. And I do want to do, and I've not really brought this up to too many people, but one of the podcasts that I want to do, because I started a media company, and so I want to have kind of like a stable of podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I'm a big fan of, if you listen to Crime Town, it's a Gimlet show. Yeah. They did the first, it's really worth listening, definitely worth listening to. It's really good. Okay. It's all about the corruption in Providence, Rhode Island, and how basically the city was run by this corrupt mayor. It's got true crime mixed in. It's all, the guy went to jail and all that good stuff. Right. But the city of Cleveland itself is so, we just saw with Serial, obviously, I'm not sure if you listened to it or not, but, they did the whole justice system as far as like, they were in the Justice Center for a year, and basically it broke down, man, this system's fucked up. But right. Cleveland itself, like, I want to do, to branch out beyond just true crime. I guess this is still true crime, but in the 70s, the mafia and the Irish in Cleveland, they really didn't get along very well. And I think, I forget which year it was, but there were 36 bombings just in the city of Cleveland that were mafia related. So I have a desire to do a podcast on that whole era of when like Chandra Burns and John Nardi and Danny Green were kind of the people that ran the ports and basically all the underground criminal activity in the city.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that I'm going to also do in 2019. So look for that. I'm not sure. I haven't come up with a title for that podcast yet, but I mean, since Crime Town's already been taken.
Well,
but yeah,
that sounds
that's
very
one that
interesting.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if did you see To Kill the Irishman, the movie?
No.
I mean, it's got Christopher Walken, Vincent D'Onofrio, but it's all about the case that I'm talking about, the Danny Green. Danny Green was this Irishman who basically took on the Italian mafia in Cleveland and was like, "Now I'm in charge."
Right.
And it's on Netflix right now. So if you got 2 hours to kill, it will teach you some stuff that you didn't know about Cleveland.
I might watch it this weekend.
Yeah, it's worth it. I mean, it's really ironic because they shot the movie in Detroit, which pissed me off because when they were filming it, I remember I was writing screenplays at the time, and I was like, man, why the hell can't they just film it here? And then just this past year, they filmed White Boy Rick in Cleveland, which is all based in Detroit. So it's like everything's ass backwards when it comes to filming movies.
Right.
And so, and I had actually written I wrote some screenplays when I was in my 20s, and the second screenplay I wrote was a fictional story about Amy's abduction, and basically it involved like a whole pedophile ring. So like whenever James brings that up, I always kind of laugh because it's like, yeah, I've danced around that, but it was in a fictional sense. So
right.
And how's everything been going with you guys? And off the record, I've been catching up with all the I just listened to your West Memphis 3 off the record, and then your follow-up to it. And again, like you said, you could do that case every freaking week. Because man, that does not have any answers either.
No, and especially when the captain and I get to talking about it, we're both long-winded people, and it's he and I can, do just go round and round and round on that case. And there's some cases that are hard to put together a great presentation because of that. That it's you get lost in the words yourself a little bit, and you go round and round on something, and you look at your computer and you go, oh wow, we just talked about that one thing for 20 minutes, and we got a whole story to tell here. But no, things have been going great. The show's been going really well. Our numbers have spiked recently, and the only thing I would like to think it was because the documentary, the Lake Erie murders,
I can attest it was, because my numbers have significant. We're talking. Your numbers are way higher than my numbers, but as far as what I'm seeing, I'm doing them like from when the day that it came out, I started doing 10,000 downloads a day.
Yeah.
So
yours will come up very quickly with the Amy Mihaljevic Google search, which is
crazy.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I remember somebody sent me an article. I was quoted in an E! News article, and I was like, "What the hell? This is weird." But I think the attention was definitely. I think it was extremely worthwhile, and I'm glad. Like you and I talked about the concern of it coming out cheesy, and I remember you placing a bet on whether or not it would or wouldn't. I'm not going to say which one you went with, but I would have to say that you were probably happy with the way it turned out.
Again, in most situations, I would prefer to be surprised than to be right. And I was very pleasantly surprised. And, I actually received a little bit of a backlash from some friends and family. And I sometimes with these, so our show Off the Record, a lot of times we'll record multiples of those in one session. So I tend to forget what I've spoke about on mic and what I haven't, but several of my friends and family saw it afterwards and then came to me and they're like, why didn't you tell me you're going to be on this thing? I said, well, first of all, if you know anything about TV or movies, and you know, when you're on my level, you even though you were filmed, you don't know if you're in something until you sit down and watch it yourself. You know, so I said I didn't want to tell a bunch of people, hey, I'm going to be on this thing, and then you sit down and watch for 3 hours, and my ugly mug never shows up on your screen. So
can I say that I did the opposite, and I was like, oh yeah, they came and interviewed me and it was great. And then like about a week into it, or about a week before, I was like, oh shit, I've told a bunch of people, what if I don't make the cut? And I was like, oh God. And then so like every time I talk to somebody about like, oh, you're gonna watch the document, I'm like, yeah, just make sure. I'm just hoping I make the cut. I hope I make the cut. Right. And then they used my voiceover in the trail, like in the first like minute of the thing, and I was like, all right, at least I made it that far. At least I'm not cut out totally.
Well, and the other thing though too was when they filmed me and when I was involved in phone interviews and all that jazz, they were very uncertain of what the final product would be. So I had little to no knowledge of what it would turn out to be. Like when they filmed me, they were like, yeah, we don't even know if this thing will ever be on TV, you know, or what we're going to do with this. So it wasn't until, I don't know, it was shortly before they reached out to me and they said, hey, it's going to air on this day. And I did have some feel. They didn't have to tell me outwardly, but I did have some feel that I was at least going to be in it. But when you hear that the thing's going to be 3 hours, I mean, how many people you tell to tune in, and what if you're on there for 15 seconds, you know? And they filmed me for like 6 hours or something ridiculous, but I'm probably on the show. When you break it down and combine it all, I'm probably on the show for 10, 15 minutes or something like that. But
yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I think we both had similar interview experiences, and I think we both ended up probably with similar amount of screen time. I was actually pretty surprised with how much they used from, you know, my interview, and there was only 2 people in that whole podcast. Well, if you include Jason, you know, Jason doesn't do a lot of interviews, so I'm pretty sure that this was the one and only that he was going to do. So Jason did that. He wasn't on my podcast, but Jim Tompkins, he was not on it, and Lori Taylor. Those are the only 3 people from the documentary that didn't make an appearance on the podcast. So, right. You know, I feel like the podcast is a nice companion piece to the documentary for anybody who wants to learn more about the case and, you know, some more of the inside stuff of what our theories are and the different types of evidence and, you know, some off the wall stuff. And when James and I go and interview those people from the storage, you guys are
in the diner.
Yeah, that
one. Like at a diner or a restaurant or something.
Yeah, I can't say where we were, but it was definitely. It was very cloak and dagger. It was, except for the fact that we were in the middle of the public. So I don't know how much cloak and dagger was really going on, but it was definitely. I got a phone call from James, or a text message. It was like, "What are you doing at 4:00?" And I'm like, nothing. What's going on? And he's like, "Come with me. It's important." And I'm like, okay. So you never know with James what you're going to get yourself into, but I definitely think that with the podcast, the documentary, you always mention it. I mean, even in, I don't know if it was in the off the record thing or was it a recent episode, I'm not sure, but you guys were talking about like if you could go back or if you could figure out, I think it was the Q&A on off the record, you know, if you could solve any case or if you could find the answer to any case. And I think you settled on Zodiac or whatever, but you know, you obviously talked about Amy Mihaljevic. And, you know, I think that's the one thing for the people that are so close to this case that, you know, we just want the damn thing solved. And right. I think what the end of the day, I think we're all going to be a little disappointed at the end of the day, because even when he is arrested, I think it's going to be like, really? Because I mean, look at the guy who was arrested for April Tinsley's death.
The guy was a complete moron. I mean,
He was a
low
garbage.
Even if you take away the crimes that we later knew that he committed,
Mm-hmm.
he was kind of a low life loser, like a loner. Doesn't seem to have a big group of friends. I mean, he's just kind of seemed like this dumb, pathetic guy. Really,
I mean, you look at that mugshot of him, and my gosh, I mean, you can just see and this was far from some criminal mastermind, is my point.
Right.
And I think that, like, with a case like this, and we've talked about it before, when it goes on for so long, we put all these different theories out there, and we always want it to be something more than it really is. But at the end of the day, if they do, and God, let's hope they do, make an arrest, I just don't know if it's going to be as satisfying, because like there's never closure. Like we feel the pain of the Mihaljevic family because we've covered these cases now for so long, and you start to have an appreciation, well, not appreciation, but an empathy towards this family that's involved. And it's just like, even if it doesn't matter if the guy gets arrested tomorrow, they're not getting Amy back. It's not like they put cuffs on this guy and Amy walks in the door. Right. And I think that is the saddest thing, that with all these cases and with all these true crime shows, and I love my true crime shows. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love it. It's just, at the end of the day, it's just always so tragic for the families, because they don't get, I mean, at least in the police station, they can, take it off the board, but a family, it's permanent. So I just think it's,
and that's why I've never understood these wackadoos. And here's the thing: I will be, True Crime Garage will be at CrimeCon this year. We love going to CrimeCon. 98% of the people that go to CrimeCon are absolutely awesome, but there's a small group, and I've spoke to some of these people at previous crime cons. They're like, my favorite serial killer is Jeffrey Dahmer because of this, and I'm like, he killed people. You have maybe he fascinates you the most. Maybe maybe he's the most interesting one to you or whatever. But can you keep in mind that we're not talking about Freddie or Jason or Mike Myers, Michael Myers. We're talking about these are real life people that lost loved ones, that died in a horrible way because they were murdered by your favorite serial killer. Right. So, and that's the, like you said, that's the sad thing. Hopefully they slap some cuffs on this dude. They find this guy, whoever he is, they convict him, but Amy's not coming back. And John Walsh said it the best. And unfortunately, it's true in this case. Mark Mihaljevic is the father of a murder victim, of a murdered child. And he, even when they make an arrest and convict the guy, Mark Mihaljevic will still be the father of a murder victim, right. And that's what John Walsh says about the situation with his son. He will always be the parent of a murdered child. And that's the stone cold truth that people need to remind themselves when they get lost in the, some of these true crime shows and my show, your show, what's on TV. Remind yourself that these are real life people that are still hurting, that are still, they still are hurting. And so, and what was heartbreaking for me, as you said, Jason doesn't talk about the case, doesn't do a lot of interviews. Mark does from time to time. He's been good about, opening up to people that have questions, but it was heartbreaking for me. I couldn't remember the last time seeing Jason's face, and I didn't know he was going to be a part of the documentary. And when he popped on the screen for the very first time, man, I choked up a little bit. This is a guy that he's a victim in a big way, and still is to this day.
Yeah, like you're so right about Jason, and the fact that if there's any victim that's overlooked in this case, it's Jason, because he's had to suffer the collateral damage of, one, he lost his mom way too early. There were lots of issues there. The issue, he lost his sister to one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in the whole United States. And, he's left to try to figure it all out. And I just feel like he's the victim that doesn't get discussed enough. And
right.
I mean, Mark's out there, but Jason, you're right. When Jason appeared on the show, and it was like, it was good to see his face, because I think for people who don't know much about the case or do know a lot about the case, they don't see Jason very often. There are very few pictures of him in the newspapers and in the old clippings and all that stuff. So, what I will say about Jason is, man, does he look like his dad?
Yeah.
The resemblance is uncanny. He is. And I know that they have a great relationship. Mark and Jason do. I personally witnessed, them on the phone, making plans, and that was great to see. And I will say that, having been to Mark's house and been invited into their home and treated, like family, they want nothing more than closure. But they're I don't know, they're real people that want answers. But God, you just feel terrible for the people that at the end of the day, that it's just not going to be over, even if there are cuffs on somebody's hands.
Yeah.
So, I guess we could wrap it up on that note, but on another note, okay. So give me your final thoughts. Like, what are your final thoughts on the whole experience and the whole, again, you're happy with how it came out, but would you be interested in doing other documentaries and stuff like that? Situations like that come up again.
I would love to do some more documentaries. However, there's a bit of a caveat in there. Amy's case was kind of near and dear to me, just in the sense that I've followed it for so long. It is one of my, one of the cases that I joke and I say there are cases that I drag along with me everywhere I go, and Amy's case is one of those cases. And I know you said, and I agree with you, it might be a little, we question how satisfying the outcome would be intellectually, I guess, for us, if it were to be solved. But I can think of a couple of cases where I threw a one-man party after they were finally solved, years and years later. And I will, in Amy's case, beer of the week will be consumed very shortly after in a celebration for what we've waited too long for. Now,
I agree with that. I'm not saying that I won't be. I am waiting for the day that I get the text from whomever it will be, most likely James. Cuffs are on the suspect or whatever. Yes, I just sort of like want the listeners to remember that at the end of the day, that this is true life. This is real life stuff. And this isn't, there's a family behind this whole thing. And
I've had several detectives tell me, not specifically about Amy's case, just in general. They've said, usually at the end of the day, throughout my entire career, what I've always saw was, at the end of the day, there was no good reason why this person took somebody else's life. There was no real good reason for it. There was nothing like you see on TV or in Hollywood with the, fictional movies. And usually the individual is not some criminal mastermind or some brilliant, undetectable serial killer. It's just not real life. But yeah, there will be a one-person party when this thing is solved. And as far as doing other documentaries, the case has to be right for me. It has to be a case that I'm passionate about, for me to be involved the way that I was with this documentary, because I am passionate about this case. And so yeah, that's my whole thing. I'd love to do more, but it would have to be a case that I'm already eyeballs deep in it just because I am passionate about it. I've had many phone calls, many internet meetings with people that are looking for to create the next big true crime TV show. And I start off every one of those meetings by saying, I'm still trying to figure out how to have the next big true crime podcast. So, and you know what? I love doing the podcast. I really do. I like being a voice rather than a whole thing. I've always enjoyed talk radio, and I think that true crime fits so perfectly on podcasts. It's just, I mean, it's perfect. People can tune into what they want to. The great thing about podcasts is you can be very specific about what you want to listen to. You know, I love sports talk radio. Love it. Okay. I'm a huge NFL fan. I could listen to people talk about the NFL every minute for the rest of my life. Now, I live in Columbus, Ohio, which I'm born and raised, big time, diehard Buckeye football fan, right? But because I live in Columbus, Ohio, every sports talk radio here is Buckeyes 24/7. They don't stop. And so what's great about podcast is you can go beyond that. You can go, not only do I like sports, but I like the NFL, and that's what I want to hear about. And same with podcasts. You can go, you know what? I like true crime. I like missing persons cases. I like solved cases. I like unsolved cases. I want to hear just about one particular case, or I want to hear a new case every week, you know, and you can find that show. There's a show out there for whatever reason, there's like 1,000 true crime shows now.
Yeah, it's
so
definitely
there's one out there for everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely the genre du jour. But the whole true crime thing, I think it's fascinating. It's the medium itself for podcasts. I love it. I mean, I'm a former news producer that saw what local news was like, you know, from the inside. And, you know, it's a business. And the great thing about podcasts is that you can put together your own podcast. You know, I independently produced this. I didn't, I had guests and help from James, and people provided me with information and stuff like that. But like your podcast, it's you and the captain. You know, it's not like you have producers and editors, and it's about producing a good product for the public to consume. But the fact that you can do it yourself, like that to me kicks ass. Like, I love the fact that I can say, okay, I'm passionate about the Amy Mihaljevic case, and guess what? I'm going to do a podcast on it, and this is how I'm going to start it. And I said I don't know what it was, March of last year, that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I set out and I started with James and went with, started there and just worked my way through the system. And I had already contacted all these people previously in my life, because it was a case, like you said, this is one that you're just passionate about, and I'm passionate about it myself. And I just, I listened to you guys for like a year and a half, and I was like, God, I just love the genre, and I love the medium. Why don't I just try it myself? And I mean, the best way to do anything is to just do it. And so I bought a bunch of mics and I did a bunch of investigation as far as, or interviews, and fast forward a year, and it's like, or not even a year, and like everything's changed. So the fact that I was able to, and I like your origin story about it as well. Like, you and the captain were both in a situation where you guys needed something to do. One, to not only bring in money, but you guys, I think, were both in between jobs. And so like the podcast just kind of became a natural thing. You obviously had good rapport with one another. So I just think it's really cool how all this stuff comes together, and the fact that you and I can sit here and talk to each other from, you're in Columbus, I'm here in Cleveland, and it's like we're sitting in the same room together. And I think the technology where it's at nowadays, the fact that I can hit publish and boom, the podcast goes out internationally in a matter of minutes, is, I think beyond anything that Edward R. Murrow would have imagined. I mean, it really is truly a fabulous medium.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. And it's exciting to see what other people are doing and what the future holds for all of us that are already doing it.
Yeah, I think there's so many different avenues. I mean, like, it's sort of like television when it first came out, in the sense that you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. And there's really nobody that's going to tell you you can't do it, because why not? I mean, so I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about, future cases. And again, like, I'm very happy with the first go around as far as the case went. I'm very happy with it, but or as far as the podcast goes, but it's on to the next one, and definitely want resolve in this one.
Speaking of which, I have something else I have to go do. So
yeah, you
Bill,
do. So do I.
And I
awesome
will talk
with
to you soon, man. Text
awesome.
me, call me, email. We'll chat soon.
Yeah, we'll set something up, and I don't know, get together somehow, and we'll figure out some new project to work on as well. And I appreciate all your time, and thank you so much for participating in the roundtable discussion of the Lake Erie murders. Who killed Amy Mihaljevic? Thanks again,
Bill.
Nick.
Have a great night.
Have a great day. Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Bye. So there you have it. The conclusion to our discussion about the documentary, The Lake Erie Murders, Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic. Thank you again for listening to this week's bonus episode of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, and stay tuned for future episodes, as well as a new podcast that is in production. Thank you again to James Renner. All of his true crime books are available on Amazon.com. Cheers to Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast, as well as the Stitcher premium show Off the Record, for his participation and time. And if you enjoy this independently produced podcast, you can help keep this show going by clicking the donate button on the bottom left on whokilledamymihaljevic.com. Donations to support the show can also be made through the Venmo app with my username at Bill-Huffman-3. Thank you to the listeners and the donors that help keep this podcast going. Without your support, this show wouldn't be possible. So again, any amount is appreciated. But you can also help support the show by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, because that will significantly help support the show and help get Amy's story the coverage it deserves. You can contact the Bay Village Police Department at 440-871-1234 if you have any new information. The FBI is offering a reward up to $25,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for the death of Amy Renee Mihaljevic. Anyone with information concerning this case, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Thank you again for listening, and please be safe.
Ohio is a land of mystery, from missing shipwrecks and lost treasure beneath her surface to strange phenomenon slicing through her skies. From myths that have evolved around historic events and people to the unsolved murders and disappearances that keep her communities wondering what happened. Find Ohio Mysteries on your favorite podcast app, and let's explore the inexplicable. OhioMysteries.com.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.